I would like to request Ms. Gauri Jante, who has read the book, to please come and say a few words. I got the manuscript of the book. I started reading through it, and some words, just words kept flashing at me, which were attributes of this book or of the writer. And I will just throw these words to you people before I read from the book. Honesty, guilelessness, a certain, there was no agenda. There was experience, and there was sort of, I think I said that to her on the email, rare ability to be frank without being in your face, and inward looking without being narcissistic, and that's rare in this kind of book. People either are under the guise of telling it all, they're still holding postures. And that absence of postures is what kept me reading this book. I also felt that there was such a, as a counselor that interested me even more, there was such a graph of a person who's struggling, using different masks, coming to a point where it's clear that none of the masks are working, and then painfully chipping away the masks and rejecting them, and risking being maskless and still not too sure what you are, being in that in-between stage where you're not ready with the real final product to again wear and go out into the world. You're vulnerable, your skin is peeled, and now you have to reform yourself. I found that very touching in the book, or this theme running through. There's also, I read some of those things, a humor without, I think some of it is intentional, some of it is unintentional. There's a way of laughing at the self, but even in that there's growth. It's not just being funny to amuse the reader. I'll read you 3 little bits which will take us from what I would call the central dilemma, the central struggle, and then the central resolution. Around age 14, I could no longer pretend to be a son. So I developed a kind of convenient split where I would be the beta when my dad was around and play the swan, which I was now beginning to enjoy when he wasn't. That was the beginning of a long and dangerous ride. When I read these words, it was the storytelling in this was part of me was, oh my God, that long and dangerous clutched with me also. The dating started, and I went out with a continuous string of boys, many wilder than me. They had a tough time. I was too much of a guy, but they figured that out only later. I was extremely deceptive in this area. I was adept at shifting gears between the boy-girl persona by now. But by and large, the masculine aspect surfaced at the 3rd date. From meeting number 4 onwards, my boyishness would dominate, and I'd remain a complete tomboy until the end of the relationship. And it was, when I read this, it became obvious that embedded into relationships like this is the end of such a relationship, because the person is not being himself. And they are going to become a cropper. There's one part which I'll read out in the end related to this. There's one thing I'll read out which is funny, but I thought it was just the heartbeat of the book, this little episode. This is her college friends. These boys love to indulge in their favorite pastime, which was to drive really fast on their loud motorbikes. I had learned to ride a bike with my boyfriend. What I owned, however, was a moped, and I rode to college. Sometimes, just for fun, I would challenge one of the boys from college to a race. That stopped completely when one day I pushed the moped beyond its capacity to climb a hilly road. It started dismantling itself part by part, in full view of some of the college gang. I had to chase all the nuts and bolts along the downhill road and collect them in a plastic bag that I used to hide under the seat for emergencies like this. Thankfully, it could be repaired. I managed to recover all the parts. After this incident, I was definitely branded as a girl who could not take care of her machine, and I could no longer pretend to be one of the boys. Why I say this is the heartbeat of the entire book is that here's this little girl with riding something which is probably only slightly larger or more powerful than a food processor, I think. And look at the bravado. But yet, somewhere we all have this inner guide which says, Acha, do this, but keep that plastic bag to collect the pieces later. And I think, that's important, and that is what holds finally a person, your plastic bag, maybe your own sense of caution, however wild you're being. Or it could be your mother, it could be your son, it could be your sister, as in her case. These are all our plastic bags. And we may go right out on a limb and the limb may break. But these things are available to us to gather the pieces and put them all together and retire, maybe injured, but with a lesson in place. The thing is, I feel, even again in counseling, that people tend, all of us, we bounce between bravado like this or bitterness. It's like, of course I can do it, or look how horrible the world is and I couldn't do it. And we just keep bouncing between these two things till we really encounter ourselves. The third thing we do is fantasy. Fantasy, which in her book you'll see there's plenty of fantasy escapes. At the time that she was doing it, they were not considered fantasy. She didn't think it was a fantasy, but it was a fantasy. It was a way to run, just keep running. After all those sort of social and emotional grandstands, the shenanigans, you pull out that plastic bag and quietly collect your things and collect your thoughts. And life is what they say is a cruel teacher. It gives you the exam first and then the lessons later. And that you will see a lot of in this book too. Lost, confused and tired, I gave up trying to understand. I thought that if I could just get through each day one by one, soon enough the responsibilities would be over. I'd had my plate full of stuff for so long that I had to call for a side plate to pile aside some of the things to be chewed upon later. By the simple process of elimination, I had really finally figured what wouldn't work for me. I didn't know if it would work later, but I had a fair sense that it would not work right then, and so that would get dumped on the side plate. See, I'm sure a lot of us, find familiar, you may have not said it in these words, but we all have side plate baat mein dekhenge, karenge, I'll get back to it. But there is so much in the universe, and I could not possibly sample everything and every experience in life. I kept piling my side plate with stuff to be handled later. It became precariously full and overloaded, and things started spilling onto the table, especially my emotions. I was becoming cold and had started to deep freeze my feelings as much as I could. Now the freezer was full too. I don't comment on that. It's evident from the piece that till again, as I say, you encounter yourself and you say, "Bas, stop piling it up. Now start tackling what you have." Even the freezer is full, so you have to stop pretending. She says, if all the astrologers and other experts that I followed for 9 years